The Chamber of Commerce, the main business lobby, the American Petroleum Industry, other business lobbies have publicly proclaimed, in fact with enthusiasm, that they are carrying out a campaign to try to convince the population that global warming is a liberal hoax. And it's succeeded, unfortunately. The latest polls I've seen show maybe a third of the population believes in anthropogenic global warming. The media contribute in their own way. So, for example, when the New York Times runs a front-page article on what meteorologists think about global warming, namely, they don't believe it. Meteorologists are pretty faces who read scripts telling you if it's going to rain tomorrow. What do they have to say any more than your barber? But that's presented as if it's a significant contribution to the discussion. The same when they, in pursuit of the fabled objectivity, present two sides. One side is 98% of scientists who know anything. The other side is Senator Inhofe and a couple of stragglers, and that's the two sides. And people are supposed to make a choice between them. They leave out a third side, which is the substantial number of climate scientists who believe that the consensus predictions are much too optimistic, including some of the leading scientists right here who've recently run what they call the most extensive modeling ever done that concludes that it's far worse than anticipated, and that their own results are an understatement because they don't take into account such things as effects of methane after permafrost disappears and so on. So that's the debate that people are presented with, and it's not surprising that the effort to manufacture consent to the belief that doesn't mean anything is pretty successful. What's rather interesting about this, and tells you something about the nature of our society, is that those same CEOs and managers who are trying to convince the public that it's a liberal hoax know perfectly well that it's extremely dangerous. They have the same beliefs that you and I have. So they're caught in a kind of an institutional contradiction. As leaders of major corporations, they have an institutional role. That is to maximize short-term profit. And if they don't do that, they're out and someone else is in who does do it. So it's basically, institutionally speaking, it's not a choice. That's going to happen in the major institutions. So they may know that they're mortgaging the future of their grandchildren, and in fact, maybe everything they own will be destroyed, but they're caught in a trap of institutional structure. That's what happens in market systems. Financial crisis is a small example of the same thing. You may know that what you're doing carries systemic risk, but you can't calculate that into your transactions, or you're not fulfilling your role and somebody else replaces you. In fact, in the United States, it's actually a legal obligation to do that for corporate executives. So, and that's a very serious problem. It means that we're marching over the cliff and doing it for institutional reasons that are pretty hard to dismantle. There's other factors like the anger and fear and hostility in the country about everything carries over to this. So if you look at polls, everyone hates Congress, they hate the Democrats, they hate the Republicans even more, they hate big business, they hate banks, and they distrust scientists. So why should we believe what these pointy-headed elitists are telling us? We don't trust anything else, we don't trust them. All of this combines. The latest election a couple of days ago is you could almost interpret it as a kind of a death knell for the species. There was an article in Bloomberg Business Week, not a radical rag exactly, running through the new Republicans coming to Congress, and they're worried about them. One of the reasons is because they are global warming deniers, almost all. That means the powerful House committees are, like science and technology and so on, are going to be in the hands of people who think there's nothing to it, or at least claim that they think that. What they actually think is another story. In fact, one of them was quoted as saying, "Can't be a problem because God will take care of it." Now, if this was happening in some small country, and maybe I don't know what, Monaco or something, it wouldn't matter much. But when it's happening in the richest, most powerful country in the world, it's a danger to the survival of the species. Nobody else is going to do very much if the United States doesn't do a lot, not just some, but take the lead. So we're essentially saying, let's kiss each other goodbye. I mean, there are plenty of examples of mutual support and cooperation in every aspect of life. In fact, one of the leading components of it, right at that time in the 30s, was labor unions. I mean, labor unions are based on the concept of solidarity. We're all in it together. And it's, in theory, international solidarity. That's why they're called internationals. Well, the extent to which they live up to that aspiration, you could debate, but it's not zero by any means. When people go out on strike, they're suffering, but for each other. Working together for each other, for the community, that can mean a lot. And in fact, in countries very much like ours, where the labor movement is strong, they're not only working for each other, but for the community. So that's basically why Canada has a national health care system instead of the one that we have, which is completely dysfunctional. It's a global scandal, twice the per capita costs of other industrial countries and some of the poorest outcomes. Why do they have it in Canada and not here? Well, you look back, in both countries, back in the 50s, the labor movement was actively pressing for health care, but in different ways. In Canada, the labor movement was pressing for health care for everybody, and that was a leading edge of powerful popular movement, which finally brought them some form of national health care, a functional form. In the United States, the unions were working for decent health care for themselves. So United Auto Workers got contracts in which they gave away a lot, but they did get pretty decent health care. In fact, that's one of the reasons why in our society, a very unusually business-run society, there has been bitter hostility to labor. We have a brutal labor history as compared with other comparable societies, and there's major campaigns, just overwhelming campaigns after the rise of the labor movement again in the 30s to try to destroy them, and it's gone a long way. In fact, you now have some see it as paradoxical situation that labor unions have turned against Obama. In the January election in Massachusetts, in which for Ted Kennedy's old seat, elected a Republican, it was carefully analyzed. The main reason for the victory of the Republican was that Obama's base just disappeared. So voting in the Democratic areas, say downtown working class areas, was quite low. The voting in the affluent suburbs was quite high. They want even more, not just the worst inequality in American history, but we want more. So they voted Republican. But what was particularly interesting was the union vote. Not many people voted, but those who did voted Republican. They voted to shoot themselves in the foot, and that was analyzed. And the reason was anger that Obama had given away everything they fought for. He gave away a public option, everything, just gave it away. Didn't have to. The public was strongly in favor of it. But one thing he insisted on, taxing their health plans. It's the one thing he wouldn't give up. Now these health plans, which they called Cadillac health plans, meaning Chevrolet health plans, they were fairly decent, but unions had fought for years to get them and had given up a lot that unions in other countries obtain in order to get health care. Now here comes Obama, the man they worked for, and he's saying, well, I'm giving away everything you want, but I'm going to tax your health plans. So they were very angry, naturally. And going back to the original point, yes, there's plenty of basis for solidarity, but it takes organization, it takes education, and it had better be achieved, or we're not going to, our grandchildren won't be talking about these things.
But is it possible, and this is from our conversation with Dmitry, who was talking about the Russian collapse, is it possible we'd be better off to actually collapse and rebuild? Because, no.
No, if the United States collapsed, the world goes with it. It's just too rich and powerful. And I hate to think what the human cost of it would be anyway. So, nothing, and in fact, Russia didn't come out of the collapse. I mean, it's sort of, yes, the economy's growing again. There are not extra millions of people dying as happened in the 90s when the economy did collapse. But it's a unsustainable, resource-based economy, which is hardly a model for anyone. It's certainly we don't want the U.S. to turn into that. That's the worst possible thing. So what has to be done here is pretty clear, but it's going to take work. You're struggling against a highly organized, very class-conscious business community, constantly fighting a bitter class war. They know what they want. There's institutional structures that are hard to break out of, even if individuals may want to. And there's a very atomized, disorganized, angry, frightened public. That's not a good mix.
No. I remember you were also talking about how the petroleum companies are looking at what the healthcare industry did to sort of sway.
That's what they say. These same statements by, say, the Chamber of Commerce and others say, well, look how they said they took as a model. They said they would take as a model the effectiveness of the insurance industry in beating back any reasonable form of health care. Of course, if they had cooperation, the Democrats were giving it away as fast as they were taking it. In fact, in August 2009, even before the big debates, Business Week had an issue where the front page was something about insurance companies gloating over victory or something. They already had basically won. Obama had given away, first of all, what's called here single payer, some kind of national health care, which there was very substantial support for. In fact, majority support for decades gave that away, didn't even talk about it. In fact, representatives of it weren't even allowed into the Senate committee hearings. Another highly dysfunctional feature of the U.S. healthcare system is drug prices, much higher than elsewhere. And one reason is this is probably the only country in the world where the government is not allowed by law to negotiate drug prices. Well, about 85% of the population is opposed to that. Obama gave it away without even a discussion, so that was gone. And the healthcare reform is probably better than the system that was there before, but it's pretty bad, and it's interesting that the big clamor about the budget, which in deficit, which I think is completely misplaced, but put that aside. If you take it seriously, if the United States had a healthcare system like other industrial countries, there would not be a deficit, and pretty soon there'd probably be a surplus. But that isn't even discussed by the deficit commission that Obama picked, which consists of 2 deficit hawks, just to make sure that it works the way the insurance companies and the financial industry will want. These are pretty serious problems, and without any, there are individuals in Congress who are willing to stand up for something better, but nothing really organized. I mean, we now have a political system where what are called the Democrats are essentially what used to be called moderate Republicans, and the Republicans are off the map. They don't even try to be a political party, just trying to make the country ungovernable, give away as much as you can to the rich. In fact, what's happening in Washington now is surreal. I mean, they're saying straight out, this country, we're not going to let this country run unless you enrich millionaires and billionaires. If you do that, maybe we'll let the country run. If there's an effort to give unemployment insurance to the millions of people who are really suffering. Sorry, we can't do that. We have to enrich the millionaires. This is almost on the front pages. And the country is so kind of in a mood of such irrationality and anger that they can get away with it.
Has that been manufactured, that anger, that lack of human value?
Well, partly, but it's partly just real. I mean, there's objective basis for it. I mean, for the economy's changed dramatically in the last 35 years. There's been a major conscious process of financialization of the economy and kind of exporting of productive industry. That's very conscious, and this is not particularly obscure why. By about that time, it was possible to make more profit in shenanigans of money manipulation than in doing anything productive. And in market societies, people with capital go for what's profitable. One corollary to that was that the political pressure just dismantled the regulatory apparatus, with the support of economists, incidentally, working with economic theories that, I mean, it's astonishing that they're not ashamed of themselves. But anyway, that's what happened. One consequence of this, one aspect of it, is that for roughly 30 years, a little over that, for the majority of the population, real wages have pretty close to stagnated. A little growth, but not much. That's most of the population. Families get by with two husband and wife working. We have very limited support systems as compared with other countries, so that means families are in trouble, and that shows up in all kind of ways. You can keep your income up by asset inflation, and by debt. The asset inflation, of course, can't last, so you have repeated bubbles collapsing. The last one was an $8 trillion housing bubble, which amazingly almost no economist could see. I mean, the trend line in housing prices is going way beyond a 100-year record. There was no reason for it. It was obviously going to burst. That's the assets of most people. They're in trouble. People are in deep trouble. Not trouble like Central Africa, but that's not the way you evaluate your circumstances. You ask, what should I be able to have in a rich country like this? So people and they also see ostentatious wealth. It's quite striking that for a while after the financial collapse, the super rich were kind of playing it cool, so they weren't try to not be too ostentatious. Doesn't look nice, but now it's over. The New York Times a couple days ago had a front page article describing exactly this phenomenon. Back to great parties, gala events, showing off how rich we are. Another article in the same issue said corporate profits have broken records. Banks have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. Well, people may not know the details, but they can see this, and they can see what's happening in their own lives. In manufacturing industry, unemployment's about at the rate of the Great Depression, and I'm old enough to remember that, and it was bad, but there was a kind of hopefulness. I know my relatives are mostly unemployed workers, but they were not desperate. They were poor, but not desperate, because it looked like something could happen. We could do things together. There's a better future. My seamstress aunts who were unemployed were in the garment workers union, and they got some benefits from that, and they also felt that some educational programs, cultural programs, they felt that we can get out of this working together. People don't feel that now. And those manufacturing jobs are not coming back, not unless we have quite a different social order here. There's plenty of need for them. In fact, what's happening in this respect is sometimes almost surreal. Like, for example, the government effectively owned most of the auto industry for a while, and the policies they were pursuing was closing down plants, just like GM had been doing. At the same moment, Obama's transportation secretary was in Europe, traveling around Spain, trying to get contracts using stimulus money for Spanish factories to produce high-speed transport for the United States, which we desperately need, as anyone who's taken a train here knows. These things could be produced very well in Michigan and Indiana. Maybe not profitable for the bankers, but certainly good for the workforce and the communities. But that wasn't even considered an option. I mean, green technology, which is supposed to be the expanding area, go to China, go to Spain, go to Germany. I mean, investors in the United States, last figures I saw, are investing, I think, about twice as much in China as they are in the United States and Europe combined. And in Germany, Spain, France, there's substantial. And China will presumably be the leader, and if it isn't already, in wind and solar technology. Can't that be done here? Sure it can. In fact, a lot of the high technology, the innovations, the ideas come from here, but they're produced there. You know, China's kind of like an assembly plant, where the surrounding industrial area in the United States assemble the products that come back here that we buy, but that could be produced here. That takes different social policies. And as long as policies in the hands of financial institutions and production corporations, like, say, General Electric, GM, which are themselves financial institutions, it's a lot of their business, they make plenty of money if it's done somewhere else.
Please come back and watch complete interviews with each of the experts. And you can join me, Thom Hartmann, anytime on the web at thomhartmann.com.